Hello, everybody. Good evening.
I'll do that. Is it like this everywhere you go?
This is fun. We have our own bottles. We can play a game. This is nice. This is nice. Good evening. How you guys doing? Good? Yes, I hope. Thank you for coming out.
So this is probably one of the smallest gigs you've done, actually.
This is big. No, this is nice. This is cozy, but big.
It's a phenomenal book, Born a Crime, and I'm not just saying that because I'm interviewing you. It is genuinely wonderful. And there are so many things, as I'm sure the people in the audience that have read, and we'll do audience questions later on, will know that it's funny, in parts it's violent. What really strikes me is that really it feels like it's a tribute to your mother.
Well, that's really what the book became. When I started writing the book, I wrote it as it was my book. That's what it was supposed to be. I set out to write a book about my stories, of me growing up, my heroic escapades. And then when I got to the end of the book and I coalesced all the stories, I realized that my mom was the hero of my story. I was just basically her punk-ass sidekick. And I'm glad it happened organically, because had I set out to write a book about my mother, I don't think I would have done it in the correct way. And I'm glad the pieces fell into place. But really, that's the truth. It's a story that really celebrates my mom. It turned into a love letter to my mom, as opposed to it being a story about how, as a child, I braved the odds.
It's a phenomenal relationship that you have with her. It's not just a traditional mother-son relationship. You are like her sidekick, your best mates. One of the things that really strikes me in the book is when someone asks your mum why she wanted to have a child, she said she wanted to feel what unconditional love was.
Yeah.
Which is really, heartbreakingly honest, that she had you to feel love herself.
Well, that was the one thing that I shared with my mom that I talk about in the book consistently, is my mom is a brutally honest person. And as a child, I often did not enjoy that honesty. Because of what I saw as parents on TV and in the rest of the world. It was, people who were particularly vague with the child and didn't really, share their emotions with their child. But my mom was honest. She said to me, she says, I didn't feel loved in the world. I didn't have love from my father. I didn't have love from my mother. I felt like I wanted something that would love me unconditionally. And that is why I wanted a child. I wanted my unconditional love. And then she goes on to say she then had me and then gave birth to the most selfish piece of shit that ever existed. It just eats and sleeps and shits and cries. And then my mom realized that the unconditional love was something she would have to give to me. And so I'm eternally grateful, but I found that quite funny. She never lets me live that down. She goes, I thought it was gonna love me, and then and she talks about it like it's not me. She was like, I thought this thing was going, and this thing in that little shit, and it just all it screamed, and it's love me, and I'm like, what about me? And it goes, I don't care about you, and so yeah, that's really why she wanted to have me.
There are some great stories in there, really funny stories about your mum, but they're also, scrapes isn't quite the word, genuine danger. And I think specifically that bus journey that you're on, where she literally has to throw you off a moving bus for fear that the bus driver is almost certainly going to kill you at that point. It's told with the sort of panache of a stand-up, but that must have been absolutely petrifying.
I think a lot of the time, what people take for granted, or maybe I think people do, is how aware you are of the danger you are in sometimes. When you grow up in a society where violence is always around the next corner, you find a lot of the time you don't have time to think and dwell in the danger that you may be in. And the same thing happened to us growing up in South Africa during this time. It was a nation that was obviously forged through violence, and violence was an undercurrent and still continues to be in our country. And during that instance, I don't even think I thought of it as being excessive danger, if that makes sense. I grew up in a world where with my friends, sometimes if we're walking to go home, we'd have to walk through certain fields or certain, open spaces, and you knew that people got robbed or killed there. So you lived in this world where you were constantly aware of the danger, you were hyper aware of it. So on the day in question, when I was in a minibus, what we call a taxi in South Africa, and and my mother basically threw me out of the car because these men were most likely, or they threatened to, and there was a good chance that they might have done, grievous harm to us. I didn't think to myself, this is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I was just like, my mom threw me out of a car, That was like the big, I was like, I'm sure there was another way we could have got out of this situation. That ended with me being thrown out of the car. And once again, in that story, when I tell it, it's myself and my mom, and we're navigating through a really stressful situation. But when push came to shove, I always trusted her. I always knew that she was on my team. So in that situation, when my mom said run, I ran. I never ever thought about it. It's an instinct, and an instinct that is honed when you grow up in certain places. I always think to myself, it's the same way, a baby gazelle in the Serengeti, when its mom starts running, it's not going to be like, what's going on? What's happening? Mom runs, you run. And then when you get to where you're going, you ask the questions.
You ask her a lot of questions, actually, particularly about faith, it seems, and some of the great exchanges written almost like sitcom scenes between you and your mother and her faith. And one thing I couldn't figure out from the book was whether you believe in God or not.
I think, in terms of religion, I do believe in God.
Being mindful of where we are.